I am Rachael Woody. It is June 15th, I believe.
16th.
16th, thank you. June 16th, we're at Mt Winery, and I've got Don Bickford, John Stehlik, and Steve Bickford here with me today. And my first question for you gentlemen is, why wine?
We were already in the agriculture business. We grow apples and pears. We're a century farm here. We started in 1909, and I had a friend that called one day and said, how would you like to plant some grapevines? And so I said, how many? And he said, 4,000. So we cut down a block of Newtown apples, which were no fun anymore. So that's how we got started. And then 2 years later, that was in the year 2000, so we've called that block Millennium Vineyards because of the year it was planted. And a couple years later, the National Wine Show for the industry was in Portland. So Don and our ex-partner Dick and I went to Portland and walked out 3 hours later, $20,000 poorer with enough equipment to make some wine. So that's how we got started.
Wow.
It was kind of a little bit of a whim, just kind of, it happened.
But we'd each been making kit wines kind of on the side, and it was fun. You could buy a box and a carboy and make a batch of wine, and it wasn't bad, but it just progressed that the apple block wasn't profitable anymore, and replanting it to grapes made a lot of sense. A lot of enthusiasm for wine grapes. People just are aghast at how much fun it is just to come out and play with the plants, and so.
And that's really why the apple block was no fun. It was all the apples today are lending towards a high density orchard, and those were big old trees. The market had gone out from them, and
predominantly pie apples, and today's consumer wants to go to the grocery store and get a Sara Lee and put it in the oven and be done. And so pie apples just weren't in favor, and Granny Smith sort of overtook them and got down for every $1 you put in, you got $1 back, and a lot of work in between. So
A year later,
yeah.
you got your $1 back.
So I know that you have a long tradition and heritage of farming, of course, because this is a century farm. What was it like starting the vineyard and the winemaking piece?
You know, when we planted our first vineyard, it's not on this site, it's about a half a mile away, but it's 6 acres, 5 acres of Pinot Noir, 1 acre of Pinot Gris. We used little milk cartons to surround the plant to prevent weed spray and to kind of baby the little baby plants. People thought we had a pet cemetery because of all the little cartons out there. Somebody asked me that.
Little markers.
they weren't used to seeing vineyards planted.
It was kind of abnormal, so they didn't know what it was. So.
But Steve and I being 4th generation, John representing 5, we've kind of done the pear thing, and it's become rote. I mean, when you go into the winemaking part of it, it's all brand new, and you learn something new every day, and it challenges your mind every time you do it. And so that's kind of the fun part of the winemaking of things.
And we have more control over this business than we do in our pear and apple business, where we grow a crop, we deliver it to the warehouse, they sell it all over the world, and 6 or 9 months or a year later we find out what it was actually worth. So it's kind of it's fairly steady, but this one is more hands-on day to day. You talk to the customer, where the other one we would load trucks of fruit going to Walmart in Texas, and we didn't know who the end customer was. So.
And for us, it was really easy to start in the vineyard. We had all the farming equipment, the tractors, the sprayers. We've got an established labor force, and really the grapes are quite complementary to all the apples and the pears. We, in the winter, the work is we'll prune the pears first, followed by the apples, and then we go into the grapes. And that arrangement really goes all the way through to harvest. So it's very
pruning,
complementary.
thinning, and harvest, and they all rotate through in progression. It's very nice, and gives a lot more work for our outside crew.
Right, it's sort of more job consistency. That's wonderful. So do you all kind of do it all together, or are there sort of respective roles?
We generally do mostly together. I mean, everybody kind of specializes in different facets of it, but at certain times we all do it together, and so.
Don always does the spray for the whole spray program for all the pears. We've got an established crew, so I'm actually, I wasn't here in 2000. My wife and I, and now three boys moved up in 2008, and I've kind of been the fill-in role. The winery is new, so I've taken over a lot of the, cellar work, cellar responsibilities, and kind of plugged in. So that was the new business, and it's like I said, it's you're doing something different every season. So when you're tired of something, whether it's thinning pears, which we're doing now, then we're on to something new, or we're getting ready to bottle.
Or then you start a cidery, and
exactly.
HR cider works, so we make hard cider as well as wine, and that's kind of taking more of the traditional stuff that we've grown and fermenting and making a beverage from that, and it's been fun.
What varietals have you found or that you've decided to start with? Was there sort of a method to that, or?
We started with Pinot Noir and Pinot Gris, and Pinot Noir mostly because Willamette Valley is famous for Pinot Noir, and that was the best way to judge our soil and climate on how it would do making wine. And we've won some awards and done very well with it, and we branched out from those two. We have some Chardonnay, we have some Riesling, we have a little bit of Gewürztraminer, we have some Syrah, we have some Tempranillo, which has been difficult to grow,
Our microclimate in Hood River really lends towards that cooler climate, Burgundian, the Germanic wines, the Riesling, which just does excellent here. It's really the fun aspect of the Columbia Gorge AVA is that there's so many little microclimates, a lot of different soil types. 10 miles east of here, you'll get so much less rainfall, and you can grow the high heat, a lot of the Syrah, the Zinfandel, Merlot, things of that nature.
Barbera, Cab.
Yep.
Just
anything, yeah.
That is one of the perhaps most interesting or unique things that we found in this week is exactly as you said, you just go a couple miles either direction and it's a completely different growing climate. With that in mind, how do you market the wine for this region? Is there sort of a strategy? Do you embrace the diversity as a region, or what have you found?
Most of our wine is sold out of this tasting room, so 85 or 90% goes out the front door at retail, which is beneficial from a business standpoint. And we started with, we had Pinot Noir, we had Pinot Gris, we had two wines. So we bought Chardonnay from another producer in the valley, and so we had 3 wines to sell, and that's how we started. And now we have between 12 and 15 wines, so we have a wide variety of things available.
The slogan for the Wine Growers Association is a world of wine in 40 miles. And so you can start with the very shortest growing season to the very longest. And it's difficult to describe to people accurately exactly what's going on. Once you can sit them down and have a long talk about this is how we're situated and what things are, they understand. But as far as a slogan and a campaign, it's tough. It really is.
And we just looked at the numbers the other day. We percentage-wise, we're just close to 70% estate-grown fruit, and the other 35% we go out. But we're only 10 miles as the crow flies to some of our other. We've got some really good vineyards and small family vineyards that we partner with to bring in those varieties that don't grow right here. So it's been fun, kind of. We started out with what? Would you guys start out with 3 or 4 wines? 2. And now we're somewhere around 12 to 14. We've had a lot of fun, like Don said. We're tinkerers, and it's fun to let's try this, or let's do a port style wine, and we do a port style wine from our Pinot Noir.
And some of the rosés were, this isn't quite ripe enough. This makes some rosé. So things just, you follow what the fruit needs to have done to it.
Speaking of the AVA, because it's sort of cross-state, what are some of the challenges and strengths that you guys have observed with that? Different laws in different states make having a group function very difficult.
the folks from Washington have to come to a distributor over here who bring their wine to a function that they can then sell. And it just, logistics, I think the folks in Washington know what their laws are, and they cover them. The folks in Oregon know what their laws are, and they cover them, and we do all right with it. But it's always kind of a struggle. We laughed about, we just need to shut down the Hood River Bridge between the states and have a party in the middle, and it'd be great. Interstate commerce people didn't think much of that, but we thought it was a great idea. Shut down the bridge.
That's right.
How have you observed the wine industry change and evolve, especially once you got in 2000?
There's been a big growth in the number of wineries, not so much in the number of vineyards, but there's been some growth there also. I think there was only 3 or 4 when we started in the valley, and now there's 15 maybe in the valley. And I think the other day we heard a report there's 38 wineries in the Columbia Gorge AVA, so that's grown quite a bit.
And it's definitely getting on the map as a wine growing region. Not, we're known for windsurfing and growing all this wonderful tree fruit, but we're definitely, it's been with the Wine Growers Association, it's a good camaraderie. And when, someone gets an award, it's great because it just enhances, everyone's knowledge of our AVA, and they'll come out here. We've got so many things going for it. We're on the Fruit Loop, which has been in existence. Steve's on that board. What is it, 40? How old is the Fruit Loop?
Well, it's at least 25 years old.
And that's, it used to
Maybe
be just
30,
a number of fruit stands going out through the valley, and people could go out. And since the wineries have started now, the wineries really probably make up a third of the Fruit Loop. And I think the rest of the fruit stands have even noticed added tourism, and it's brought in a few other people that might not have come out, and it's just added to the increased traffic, which has been great.
And the wineries are more year-round than the fruit stands, which are just kind of seasonal in the summer. There's some alpaca places that sell wool, and they can be more year-long businesses, but the wineries, I think, have more open months than anybody else, and it's just something steady for the tourists to come see.
But I think the same spirit that was in the Willamette Valley when they started out, of everybody's kind of doing the same thing together, exists in this AVA. Everybody's willing, somebody calls up and says, I'm short of filter pads, we'll come on over, we'll loan you this, and people cooperate very well together. And it's the group of people started out by in the AVA by having potluck dinners together before the AVA formed, and that was just because you didn't ever see other grape growers unless you did that, and it evolved to be more and more formal as it went along to do some of the things that we need to do in marketing the area.
Have any of you been involved in the Wine Growers Association or the AVA development?
And Don was on the board for a while, and I'm on the board now.
How much work does that portion take, in addition to owning your own winery and farm?
Well, the AVA has been, 10 years in existence or so? And we started from, it might even be 12 years, but we started from just a very part-time coordinator, if not volunteer coordinator, till now we have a full-time coordinator. So it's grown a lot, but there's more wineries to support it, and there's more tourists, more wine being made, more business being transacted. So it's grown, done very well.
But in the end, the difficulty is getting funds to pay a director to make the association work without having to have everybody volunteer and do all of the chores that have to go on. The information packets and answering the phone and dealing with emails, all of that becomes pretty full-time occupation.
Yeah, having the coordinator is really key, but it's part of it, part of being in this community that you need to sit on a board. I do the Columbia Gorge Fruit Growers, which is the Fruit Growers Association, as well as the Visitors Council, and you just sort of, every once in a while, you have to rotate and take your turn sitting on those, because that's how, it's toughest when they get established, but once you get a coordinator and they become a lot more self-directing. And
but a small community is all about volunteering and making things happen. And John and I are both in the volunteer fire department. Don was on the county planning commission for a few years, and I'm on a community bank board, and so that's how things get done.
This may be a question more for Steve and Don. I have a little bit of familiarity with Hood River because my dad grew up here, and so we've been to visit my grandma. At what point did Hood River become a wine destination? Has it just been in the last 10 years when it became an AVA?
Yeah, I believe so, yeah.
Yeah, and it's more as people have looked at what we can produce on the land and figured out the quality of wine we can produce. One person tells another, who tell 10, who tell 100, and it snowballs a little more and a little more, and it's more word of mouth than anything else. It's still some of the traditional, the Thanksgiving deals in the Willamette Valley. We've tried to emulate, but not as successfully as we'd like. It's not a big crowd for Thanksgiving. And President's Day doesn't end up to be a big rush of people, where they might go to Dundee. But more and more as people hear about us, and it's almost a shorter drive to get to Hood River than it is to the other side of Portland with the traffic that's involved. So as people learn about that, they come down and explore, and more people do the same thing.
But we've seen a pretty steady increase from once we opened the doors here. We poured at fruit stands before and while we were building this building. But since we opened the doors, knock on wood, it's been a nice,
every year it goes up.
Steady increase, and starting to think about opening the doors a little earlier in the year, or maybe for the weekends. It's just, as we've grown, the traffic is definitely come.
I think the wine business has grown in conjunction with the windsurfing business that came to town 15 or 20 years ago, because they kind of brought another influx of young people. They bought old houses, fixed them up. There's more restaurants that came to town. There's more reasons for the population of Portland and Vancouver or Bend or Seattle to come over here and visit. There's more things to do, and the wineries are just part of that overall increased tourism in the valley.
So given the tremendous amount of growth in really just a short time, where do you think it'll go? Like, what will the next 10 years look like? Either for yourselves or for this region?
I think it will continue to grow steadily, but kind of based on the amount of acreage that you can produce. You can produce a lot of wine on a small footprint, so there's a lot of room to grow, but some of it you would have to oust some of the traditional fruit growing areas to plant to grapes, and that's a big leap of faith to get over growing one crop and going to the next. So, but as more and more people get interested, there are people who have come up from California and looked and said, wow, and there's enough money in other places that if they want to do it, they can come in and find a place and capitalize it and make it happen.
Yeah, I think it'll be steady growth. The wines are getting better. There's more tourists, more accolades in magazines and so on for our wine. So I think it'll just be a steady growth pattern.
And everyone's business model is slightly different. Our main focus is to get people out to, visit us, come see where we make the wine, where we grow the grapes, and then enjoy the beautiful mountain. And we haven't looked as much into large scale distribution, nor really wanted to, necessarily become a 100,000 case a year winery. We still wanted to keep it boutique. It fits with, we can still get our hands dirty at harvest, and it complements everything else that we've talked about it, that we could produce more and then look at wider distribution, but no one really, it's just not something that we really want to dive into yet. So it's, others have more of a model of out there and get their wine out into the grocery stores, but that's not, I would say most of the wineries in the gorge want to get people out and stay sort of small. So it's nice aspect of it.
What has been something that was sort of an aha moment, or something you learned, or something that you wish you could have done differently
Not planning temperament. I'm just kidding.
There's always part of this that you learn by doing. We've had some plants at this site that haven't grown the way we had hoped they would. And that's just, you choose a grape that fits with the site. And some of that takes time to learn. We know people close to us that have grown some of the plants that we've lost, and they say they're just hard to establish in this area.
Mm-hmm.
So you learn by doing on that one. I think in terms of, we put this place up in
2009.
and it finished in 9, started in 8, and that was just about the time the financial markets were crashing, the world was coming to an end, everything was doom and gloom. It's hard to stick your toe in the water when everything's coming apart around you, but I think it was the right decision. This has kind of become community center. People come in to gather in small groups in large, and this has just worked out marvelously well. And so it's a lovely spot. It's off of the main highway, but close enough that you've got good access. Just all the things that you do in the tasting room work pretty well here. We can have small conferences that are cut off in a separate room. We can have the main hall and have a big crowd in. So it's just worked out really well.
And yeah, it was definitely a leap of faith to build the size of building that we had here, especially at that time in the economic market. But we believed in the area and that it was a place that we feel pinch ourselves lucky enough to get to live here and farm the ground out here and make wonderful wine. So everyone, you see a lot of people at our vineyard along the highway out back. All of a sudden someone will just pull over and you think they've blown out a tire. Nope, they just want to run out and take a picture over the vineyard of Mount Hood in the background. So
Well, great. I have sort of run through my bullet points of questions. Is there anything that I should have asked that I didn't, or any stories that you want to share?
Well, when we started out, in 2000 we planted our first vines, and in 2002 we incorporated to become a winery. Mount Hood Winery started in the valley back in the late 60s, early 70s. Then it moved over to Sandy, Oregon. The company was sold. They made fruit wines. And then from about 89 to 2002, that name was just not used by anybody. So we just paid the state licensing fee. Don's wife, Libby, found the name and it wasn't being used. And so we picked it up, and that's how we became Mount Hood Winery. But we were partners with another couple of people, the Reeds, that have Weiss Vineyards now. And so we were partners with them for about 5 years. And then decided to split apart and still friends. But it was best for both of us to start our own, enlarge our own businesses. And so then I bought the bar on eBay, which is kind of how the building started.
My wife and I were still living in Portland, Vancouver area at the time, and we said, your dad is planning something, because he bought a 40-foot bar? 30-foot bar. And, we hadn't heard of plans of the winery. They had the winery, but it was up at our friend the Reed's building, and, he's got it stored in the back, but, I said, what is it for? Oh, I just got a really good deal on it. I'm like, so kind of knew something was in the works at the time, and then
So then we had the bar, and then I hired an architect and said, here's the bar, build a winery to fit. And so it worked out really well. And we had a really good builder and a really good architect, and we're just really happy with the results, and they were good to work with. And so it's been very successful and gratifying to do it, and a lot of fun.
So is this an idea, the tasting room in the winery, that just sort of percolated with you, or did you two?
It's all of us. It's just kind of,
And
things happen.
We had some visions when we started out that maybe the Mount Hood Railroad that runs behind, they'd been running steam trains the year before we started to put this up, that it would be a nice place to have a whole trainload of folks show up. And in the end, that really hasn't worked out, but people can see from the train over here and drive up and visit, and it's been just fine. But that was one of the motivations for choosing this side over another was that railroad might tie in. And best laid plans.
Anything else?
Just as a closing, we've been very lucky in this. Some people don't have stable places. They're in a house for 4 years and they're on to the next one, and that's how their life rotates. And I'm in the house. I came home from the hospital in '54. Steve's in a house that Mom and Dad built when I moved out. John's in a house that Granddad built that Steve had his kids grow up in.
So Steve had 3 daughters in the house that's actually over my shoulder, and now I'm raising 3 boys.
And the grandparents on both sides were here. Mom and Dad were both born here. And so there's a lot of rich history of stories of, we used to on Sunday afternoons go drive around for entertainment, and they would point out this is Mr. Jones's house, and this is the shoemaker place, and they pointed all the different areas and kind of knew everything that went on. So you get a rich background into really what the sense of place is.
Absolutely. I mean, that was the huge draw when Steve called up and said, hey, I've got something serious to talk about. I need to do it in person. And my wife's thinking, oh my God, he's got a heart attack or something's going on. And he drove down and asked, hey, we're building the winery. What do you think about coming up and farming? We were in Vancouver at the time. And, we had 1 child and 1 on the way. And it was, it was a very easy decision. You can always move into the city, but the opportunities to come out and farm and work the land you don't always have that opportunity. The boy, and just to raise our boys out here, they can always go into the city if they want to and decide to at a later point. But it's tougher to come out here, and it's been a wonderful experience. So
It's gratifying as 2 kids that grew up here as little kids, and it's a sleepy little lumber / agriculture town. Suddenly it's the place to be. So it's kind of gratifying to see all the people that come here and they look around, wow, I'd love to live here. So it's very satisfying.
well, thank you.
Thank you.